Good morning, good evening, whoever you are, wherever you are, whatever you might be doing. We wish to welcome you to the Silverlight Show. The Silverlight shines to illuminate that which lies hidden in darkness. For those of you tuning in today, we welcome you in. This is going to be a longer, more serious episode, so get yourself something to relax with, whether that's a seat, whether that's a drink, whatever you may choose, and join me because we're going on a journey. I have been amusing myself by watching sovereign citizens try to defend themselves in court. And the interesting thing that I noticed about them is it wasn't any particular ethnic group. This movement has adherents from all over the place. It's very difficult for anything to be accepted by that many people. But then he started looking into it, and it gets far more entertaining. Now, let me give you a sovereign citizen believes that their rights are protected by the Constitution and they are not subject to anything other than said Constitution. If your state, municipality, whatever it is, has a law, it does not apply to them. If you catch them driving illegally, they're not driving, they are traveling. And that's basically the strategy. They're going to try to use word games to either frustrate a judge or a jury, or they're going to blither on about things that honestly make no sense in a courtroom. And they think this is somehow going to help them win a case. Now, the weird thing, once you break it down, this is a relatively recent movement. This isn't a bunch of people, that started off in the, 1780, whatever the heck it is, when the Americans started their revolution. Sorry, even though I love history, the history I prefer to study is far more ancient. No, this actually became a thing in the late 1960s and early 1970s. And of course, it was started by the churches. Because what God says is right, and to quote the U.S. Constitution, well, not directly, you have God-given inalienable human rights. Now, the funny thing is, you ever get a chance to watch these trials? These guys can't say inalienable. They try to, but I mean, you have a script. Wouldn't you practice reading it before you go to court? That's not the issue, though. The concept of being a sovereign citizen basically says that the United States is a business entity. And because it is a business entity, everything it does is for profit. Yes, even the courts are for profit. They think that the fines go to the court system instead of the general government coffers. And their argument is, since they did not consent to a contract, then their civil rights supersede not the Constitution, but the local laws and all that sort of thing. For example, if they're caught driving without a license, which is an astonishing number of cases, they argue that they were traveling and they have the right to travel. Okay, in the strictest sense, they're not wrong. But they're in a car. Cars are organized, licensed, and supervised by the various Department of Highways in various countries. By the way, this has spread to Canada and Mexico as well. But as long as they don't say driving, they think they can get away with it. Well, no, you're still subject to the same laws. You have the right to travel by all means. Get on your Nikes, find yourself a horse. Actually, I don't know whether a horse would be prohibited because aside from basic care and feeding, I've never owned a horse and never had to license a horse or whatever you need to do to make sure that animal cruelty people aren't going to come knocking at your door and try to take the horse. So let me say I'm not sure on the horse, but there's tons of ways to travel available to you: planes, trains, automobiles, and you are subject to their rules while they're on it. Sovereign citizens do not believe this. Sovereign citizens believe that everything is a business contract. This is kind of a libertarian philosophy that's been twisted to its weirdest political end. But boy, it gets interesting. So, like I said, it started in the 1970s and really started. It was a white supremacist and anti Semitic ideology. There was a lot of the teachings they use today was originated by a Christian identity minister, William Potter Gale. Now, what William Potter Gale was taking advantage of was people's sense of disenfranchisement. During the 70s and the 80s, there was a pretty big recession. There's another mass exodus of farmers that were forced into the city and feeling disenfranchised. And see if you've heard this one before. Them people are coming up, taking our jobs, they're taking our women, they're bringing in drugs and prostitution. Yeah, that's nothing new. That's 60-year-old logic. And it was poor logic back then, and it's poor logic now. But it also means that you renounce the use of, well, for one thing, income taxes. Wouldn't it be just nice to call up the government and say you're not going to pay income tax because it violates your religious freedom or whatever you might claim? Yeah, life doesn't work that way. Debt-based currency, yes, they supposedly believe in gold and silver, and most of these people probably wouldn't know gold and silver aside from the chains around their neck and the rings on their fingers. And of course, where does it come from? The far right posse comitatus movement. Why is debt-based currency and debt collection so bad for whites? Because they're tools of Jewish control. Ever heard this before? Yeah, me too. It's a broken record that needs to be broken. It's just disturbing that here we are in 2024 still talking about this nonsense. Anyway, in the 80s, like I said, there was a financial crisis, a lot like what we consider happened in 2008, and it really started to spread. Now, there are still a number of white supremacists that believe in it, but a curious thing happened. Way back in the early 20th century, there was a gentleman born by name. Well, he was born as Timothy Drew, but he was changed his name to the noble Drew Ali. And it was the Moorish Science Temple that he set up. Now, the Moorish Science Temple has some really peculiar beliefs. First of all slaves and all African Americans came from Morocco. Every single one of them. Nobody came from anywhere else. Nobody came from Mauritius. Nobody came from South Africa. Nobody came from Rwanda. They are all from Morocco. Now, while I grant him, there were some pretty significant slave markets in Morocco. Slavery has been illegal for a long time now, and for the past 200 years, people have been coming to the United States to live the American dream, or to Canada to live the Canadian dream, which is to watch hockey and drink beer. That was a joke, probably inappropriate given the subject matter. But these people tell themselves that they are foreign citizens and thus are not subject to United States rules and laws. Well, yeah, you are. I've been around the world. I've traveled. And the first thing I do is study the culture and the customs of a given country to make sure that I know littering is illegal. Okay, I'm not going to piss off anybody local. I'm not going to litter. Not that I do anyway. But the Moorish temple, and anytime you get science and temple together, it's worrisome. I've said it before, but my belief doesn't drive science. Data drives science, or data, depending on want to be Star Trek season 1 or 2. But we can confirm the science we have with data and experiments. And we can see what's happening with experiments. So that's what science is. It's not belief. I can believe as hard as I like right now, and my mouse is not going to lift itself off the table and fly around. Here, let me believe that really strongly for a second. Well, I didn't get it to fly, but it did light up a little bit. So, but then again, the lights kind of go and fade. See, I had a belief, but then I listened to science. So when you hear science involved with any religion, yeah, it's sketchy to say the best. Also, they established their only Moorish science temple in Baltimore. Now, that's nothing against Baltimore. Baltimore is actually a good place to put things because it's near the center of a nation. But if I'm telling you this is the only true place, that's sounding very centralized and not at all like a temple. Look at Christians. There's churches everywhere. Look at Jewish people. They got synagogues everywhere. Look at Islam. Islam has all sorts of mosques. They might say this is the mosque that we all pray towards, but they don't say it's the only mosque. Might be the most important, just like the church, well, the Catholic Church recognizes Rome as the foremost church. I'm going to just leave it at that to make my life easier. But the Moorish Science Temple has started to give away nationality cards. This is where things start to get twisted. Remember I said all black people come from Morocco? Sorry, all African Americans. Let me be specific. Well, apparently they also established some sort of a treaty with the First Nations. I don't know whether it's Cherokee or Chickasaw, whatever it is. And that's what they're trying to say. Their religion believes that they are part of the Moroccan Empire, and thus a part of the Moroccan religion, because Morocco is where the Moorish people used to be. This logic comes from like the 14th century when the Spanish were getting the Moors out of Spain. Where this Drew Ali fellow came up with it is anybody's guess. Oh, he also decided to name himself as a prophet. Because, of course, you need a prophet. Oh, they also had a funny little trick where even though they had that one true temple, Drew Ali moved to Chicago. It wasn't the big main one, but your main prophet is moving from the first and only temple to another one he established. And that's pretty odd. These people are sovereign citizens, and here's where things get very interesting. I mentioned before in the 1970s, William Potter Gale was a Christian identity guy, meaning he was trying to reinforce, Christian identity and bring people back to roots. If there's one thing I want anybody to worry about, it's when somebody says, I'm going to bring things back to the roots. Whether that's about sports, whether that's about entertainment, it's humanity develops by going forward, not by going backwards. So by bringing things back to their roots, you get worried about it. The interesting thing is while the white sovereign citizens are very right-wing and linked to that movement, churchgoers, that sort of thing, they're linked in their ideology with the temple that would one day begin the Nation of Islam, with Louis Farrakhan at its head. Yeah, remember his Million Man Marches, which sometimes made up a fraction of a million? Those two sides are allied in the present day. Of course, you won't see them congregating together or organizing rallies or anything anybody else would do, but they spring from the same seed. So, sovereign citizens do some pretty interesting things. First of all, they get passports issued. Well, passports that are not actually signed by any existent country. And the passport says, do not seize, do not search on them, which I find hilarious. Secondly, they print license plates that say private. That's it. I mean, you want to have a beacon to police? Have a license plate that doesn't match the other license plate in your areas. And of course, somebody's making money on selling these identifications, selling these licenses. And you want to know what the number one complaint for these sovereign citizens is? It is, of course, driving offenses. Cops see them because they stand out like a sore thumb, pull them over, and then they have to go to court and cite their sovereign citizen crap. And again, I encourage you to listen to some of these. They're very entertaining. It's a whole lot of, under the Fourth Amendment, I have the right against search and seizure. Well, you do, except when there's suspicion. I have a right to get against search and seizure myself. But you know what? If I'm exploding fireworks in the backyard and selling crystal meth out the front yard, I fully expect the police to be interested. And though you have the right, if you notice it says unreasonable search and seizure. Police do have to get a warrant or have probable cause to search and seize anything. Probable cause? You don't have a license plate, or at least not one that's recognized by the states. Then they want to see your documents because there's so many stolen cars out there. It's just something that happens. They want to see it. And once you've got somebody pulled over and they're already doing one thing that's suspicious, chances are there's something else in there they're going to get into. I think the reason why this movement is popular is it gives a sense of false empowerment to people who feel the world has given them a raw deal. And you know what? It rains on the just and the unjust alike. So I've been at the back end of some pretty nasty treatment. Go read my book, Family Disservices. Do you think I wrote that because I was bored one day? Nope. The difference is I had the emotional maturity to say, okay, this is not all the government. This is one part of the government working in a poor manner. And I actually wanted data. So I went out and researched and produced a book. Whereas these people decide that breaking the law every day is a more acceptable compromise. You can claim your laws or your rights from the Constitution, the Charter of Rights, whatever bill that you might have, but the cops are pretty smart. The courts are pretty smart. And there's provision made for you in those courts to be represented. So while you may have the right to life, liberty, and security, you also have the right to have those settled in a court of law. And, oh, that's one of the other things. They like to dispute the authority of a court. They claim that the flag at the back of a court, which is gold fringed, is an admiralty flag. Want to know something about an admiralty flag? It's not gold fringed, because that gold starts to rust in sea weather, the water and the spray and the salt, and it looks frickin' terrible. So it's not an admiralty court, it's a fully constituted court. You want to know what happens when you ask a judge to prove his authority? They're going to, and it's not going to go well for you. There's not exactly an epidemic of people running around pretending to be judges. You know, when they get to work, they're like everybody else. They come in, hey, Francesca, how's it going? Oh, I had a rough day yesterday. They talk exactly like we do, except they're in the business of working cases. And that is charged to them by the government. They're not making money based on how many convictions they get. Well, in some cases where they're elected, I don't understand why you elect a public official ever. Like, okay, politicians, yes, but like a sheriff, I don't want the guy there that was elected because, you know, he was the best at campaigning. I don't want my judge making decisions based on who was his political patron. I want those offices to be independent. But that does not invalidate the authority of the office. The office still exists, it's there for a reason, and trying to challenge a judge's authority unless you have some critical piece of evidence that he never graduated law school or the bar, you're screwed. And right there is where most sovereign citizens make their worst mistake. They challenge the authority of the court because it's not representative of the Constitution. And every judge I've seen is able to say, under state law, section 1, whatever the heck it is, we're allowed to form this. Sovereign citizens are definitely worth looking into if you have the time and patience. There's tons of videos on YouTube. I don't know where we're going to begin. They're entertaining to watch, and they're also informative because these people think they are above the law. The same law that you and I are compelled to obey. And I don't say compelled as in there's somebody, with a club. Thanks YouTube for making me struggle to find that one. Club at the back of your head ready to smack you if you do anything wrong. But it's in your best interest not to commit arson, not to steal, not to do not to murder, not to assault somebody. These are all in your interest. It's in your interest to obey traffic laws because there's fines in place to make sure that people play fair. I would love to go to the libertarian point of view, which I will cover in another episode, because you can't get into these without going into extended episodes. But unfortunately, I know people, they need the choke chain as well as a little treat in front of them to make sure that they keep on the straight and narrow. That's unfortunately what courts are. They're the choke chain. Your treat is you get to do whatever you like within the laws, which are pretty darn broad. There's nothing stopping me from buying a horse if I meet the criteria. That might be, okay, a cheeseburger. I can go to so many places and get a cheeseburger. It's all been safetied and taken care of by the Board of Health, and I know I'm going to eat that cheeseburger. It's going to be at least up to minimum standards. And nothing's forcing me to do it. It's my freedom to choose whether to do it or not. When I have a car, I have to sign a contract with the government, which is known as a driver's license, because the roads technically are public, technically are not. I mean, I'm not allowed to go on the big major freeways, but then again, would I want to walk down one of those? No, I'd want to be in a car, have at least a ton of metal between me and everybody else hitting me. But sovereign citizens don't get that. It's an inherently selfish movement that says, I don't need to listen to your laws, sir or madam, whoever happens to be attending. And I can quote the authority set down by me, and they all get their information and case studies from the same website. It's depressing. I'm going to figure out that website one day. Today is not that day. Tomorrow's not looking good either. And then we'll have a laugh about some of those. I think that would make an entertaining episode. But with that, I'm going to bring this episode to a close. It was a little bit of a longer episode because we had to do a bit more of a deep dive. But I think it was worth it because we see the far right that while both sides are on questionable ideological grounds, which is my way of describing the far right people that like to attract the Proud Boys and the Nation of Islam, are actually taking their signals from the same place. So keep that in keep that in mind, that not everybody is reading from the same playbook, and some people are actually trying to destroy that playbook. We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Silverlight Show. If you did, please like, share, subscribe. If you haven't subscribed already, don't forget to click the bell icon down below. That way you'll be notified every single time that we have a new episode. And we hope you have a fantastic day.